But let's look at some images. This is not January 6th, ladies and gentlemen. This is actually the inauguration of President Trump in 2017 in Washington, D.C. Here's a burning car with "We the People" spray painted on the side. These were scenes in the streets. This was President Trump's inauguration, Washington, D.C. The headlines: Washington protests turn violent as Trump assumes presidency. Inauguration protesters and police clash on Washington streets. The government drops charges against all inauguration protesters. That's stunning, isn't it? They nearly burned down Washington, D.C., much of it, committed violence, fought with police officers, caused incredible amounts of damage, and they dropped all the charges against these protesters. So that was 2017. Let's move forward. This is not January 6th of 2021. This is Minnesota in 2020. By the way, that's Governor Tim Walz's state. Here's another scene from Minnesota. Over 95% charges dropped. The headline: They've lost control. Why Minneapolis burned. Governor Walz's state. Minneapolis burned. And how did Governor Walz and Democrats feel about treatment of police? This is how police were being treated, while over 95% of the charges were dropped. Protests near the White House spiral out of control again. Protesters were so out of control that they had to take President Trump into the bunker. And at the same time, this is when the current Democrat presidential candidate for the United States and the current vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris, shared the Minnesota Freedom Fund bail bond link so that criminal rioters could be bailed out of jail, take back to the streets, and continue the assault on the American people, violence, rioting, and even leading to killing people. But yet, I want to add, it's the current administration under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and their Department of Justice led by Merrick Garland and the FBI with Christopher Wray that is continuing the prosecutions, or we should say persecutions of January 6th offenders from January 6th. Back to the Summer of Love. More than 1,500 Minnesota businesses were damaged in George Floyd protest, and they expect to take years to rebuild. You know, BLM as an organization raised money on Act Blue, the Democrats' fundraising platform, and I don't think any of that money went to rebuilding those communities where all that damage was caused. Again, most of the charges, as reported by The Guardian, most charges against George Floyd protesters were dropped. And the analysis shows, and these are the facts, the Department of Justice is not continuing to hunt down protesters from the Summer of Love in 2020, is not continuing to prosecute them. Their charges were dropped. George Floyd riots caused record-setting $2 billion in damage. New report says here's why the true cost is even higher. This is talking about insurance claims. More than $2 billion. Again, I'd like to remind you that the stats for January 6th stand at the Department of Justice estimates $1.5 million in damages to the Capitol that was on one day for a matter of hours in the afternoon. And the BLM riots were night after night consecutive riots. But it didn't stop in the Summer of Love. You see, the left continues to this day. And while many January 6th defendants have been prosecuted and put in prison, some for months and some for years and some for many years, the left continues their so-called protest. Well, January 6th defendants are being put in jail for going inside the Capitol. Many leftists who are protesting come in our office buildings as recent as this year And the Department of Justice is not hunting them down, is not holding them in the DC jail, is not prosecuting them and putting them in jail for interrupting Congress. And believe me, they have interrupted Congress. This is earlier this year with the Free Palestine Ceasefire Now protest. This is the Cannon office building. This is where my office is located, where they had to stop all committee hearings, had to stop Congress completely, and Capitol Police has to remove them all and take them out of the building. By the way, they haven't done this just once. They do it frequently. Now, if you want to know who these people are, here's a screenshot of their phones. They have an organized group that organized that protest, and the name of their group is Global Intifada. There was a time in our country where our government considered a group with that type of label to be radical extreme terrorism and a threat to the United States. That's the group that has been protested in our office buildings, and the Department of Justice is doing nothing about it. My staff captured this photo of one of their phones as they were texting one another. And the names on this list are very serious names linked with organizations that should be investigated. I'd like to remind everyone also that the words from the Democrats have been so extreme, radical, and dangerous. They have truly threatened the life of President Trump. In one of the videos that I have, we have none other than Rick Wilson here on camera. Flashback to the Lincoln Project co-founder Rick Wilson in 2023. They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, is what Rick Wilson said during an interview on none other than MSNBC. Well, sure enough, they tried to do that, didn't they? On July 13th of this year, they tried to put a bullet in President Trump's head as he spoke in a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. And thank God Almighty, and it's a miracle that we all witness, that President Trump was not assassinated on July 13th and that bullet grazed his ear. And as the result of God's grace and mercy, President Trump is alive today, and the left did not take him out as they have tried so hard to do. That's where we stand in America today. And the reason why I'm holding this hearing is because none of us support any violence. We don't support an assault on our country. We do not support a so-called insurrection, as it has been labeled. But January 6, 2021 was not an insurrection. And it should not be labeled an insurrection. But what we've witnessed for nearly coming up on 4 years now has been our own federal government create a two-tier justice system and politically weaponize the Department of Justice against the people that were there on January 6th.